What really is post-traumatic stress disorder? It's a term we're hearing more and more about, post-traumatic stress disorder. We'll talk about it next here on Hope and Possibilities.
Dr. Gregory Jantz is a best-selling author of over 45 books and the founder of the Center A Place of Hope, voted a top 10 center for depression treatment in the U.S. As the pioneer of whole person care, Dr. Jantz is known as the messenger of hope. Now the nation's expert on anxiety, depression, substance abuse, relationships, trauma, and PTSD, here is Dr. Gregory Jantz.
Hi, I'm founder of the Center, Dr. Greg Jantz. Here we are in a month that's called Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month. And what is post-traumatic stress disorder? It's important to talk about this now. We're going to move quickly. I value your time, so I want to just share with you, this is not obviously a new diagnosis. It's one that we've seen many years. We usually think of veterans, but now one of the most common words that people are using as they're reaching out, calling for help, is the word trauma. Post-traumatic trauma disorder. And trauma can be defined in many different ways, but people are feeling at a level like never before. Never have we ever seen this level of seeking help for trauma. It used to be depression. I need help for depression. I need help for my high levels of anxiety, which is still there. But right now, the descriptor is the word trauma. So the common diagnosis, and I'm going to say it is common now, more than ever before, is post-traumatic stress disorder. And here's a few things. This is a part of the criteria, the diagnostic criteria, not my criteria, but the diagnostic criteria. Have you been exposed to death, to threatened death, actual or serious threatens serious illness or injury or sexual violence? Maybe I've been exposed to it. It could be direct exposure, it could be witnessing it, could be even learning that a relative or close friend was exposed to a trauma. And so one of the things that happens is if we're growing up as a young child and we are witnessing strong emotional abuse, domestic violence, maybe we were a victim of sexual abuse or emotional abuse, maybe we lost a loved one, a parent early on, but there's significant early childhood trauma, and then we just kind of live our life and go about our life, and we find that I'm struggling with depression, I'm struggling with anxiety. And this is where we look at criteria number 2, which is the persistent or re-experiencing the event. I'm reading from the diagnostic manual via memories, nightmares, flashbacks, emotional or physical distress. And anyway, we're being reminded of that over and over and over. That's post-traumatic stress disorder as part of the diagnosis right there. You may, this is number 3, have a severe avoidance of any trauma-related thoughts or reminders. You may avoid a certain place, avoiding a certain memory. You may avoid certain people because you don't want to have a trigger of what that trauma did to you, and you start to re-experience it again through a painful memory. And it can really, simply put, be overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming. I recall a gal telling me at some point, she goes, if I really allowed myself to think about what was done to me repeatedly, it would be so overwhelming that I'm pretty sure I would lose my mind. And so I have to avoid it. So that's what it can feel like. So intense that I have to avoid it. We may, and this number 4, have negative thoughts or feelings that worsen. I can't recall certain key features of the trauma. I try to push them down. I try to do avoidance through, maybe I start drinking alcohol or misusing prescription drugs, or simply put, escapism behaviors. Escapism behaviors are just those behaviors to avoid, to numb out, And you may find that the persistent intrusive thoughts about this trauma, you just can't seem to hold that back. And so you would try to, what I call mood alter, change how we're feeling, take a medication, drink alcohol, but in some way divert those feelings because of it. You may have bad dreams. Again, this is from the list of the diagnostic criteria. You may have hypervigilance, or I get super easily jump. I can always go about my day feeling I'm on edge. I may have some real significant sleeping issues. I may have trouble falling asleep, insomnia, or I may fall asleep, but it's like clockwork. Every night I'm up. I wake up. And I'm waking up, my heart's pounding, I'm in a cold sweat, and I feel that I'm reliving something. It's like I'm having a panic attack in my sleep. You may also have just a struggle, just general negative feelings about everything. And with that can come an inability to trust. I can't trust anybody. With that can come a sense of, wow, I'm just so angry. I become enraged. I know that nobody's trustworthy. And I develop what I call a critical spirit against everyone and everybody. So, and you may also, though, flip over where you feel a lot of guilt. That in some way you feel like you may be responsible for what's happened to you. And that responsibility. There's also can be a real loss of just interest in activities that used to give you joy. And those activities that used to give you joy now are a burden. Exercise, taking care of yourself, eating good, having good nutrition, those are all take too much energy to take care of ourselves. All right, I do want to just mention that this is our 40th, the Center, A Place of Hope 40th anniversary, and we see individuals, it really is every day, with the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. And there does reach a point where all these symptoms intensify so much that you feel like, I am not functioning. I am not functioning, and I have to just disconnect from life. I have to either do that through addiction, and I avoid everybody, I isolate, but I find ways to disengage with life because of that sense of being overwhelmed. Now, there's a lot, in fact, my information that's out on trauma. And I'll just mention my most recent title is Triumph Over Trauma. Triumph over trauma. What does that look like? Well, I purposely chose the word triumph because it is pretty well the opposite of trauma. And I do believe, because now through the years of seeing thousands of people who have recovered, never forget that they've recovered from their trauma, and they've learned a new way of living. They've learned a level of compassion that they never thought was possible, both compassion for themselves, compassion for others. And one of the things that does have to happen is we need to be able to tell our story to a trusted individual who also has the skills and the ability to help us. So often we might be telling our story to family members or others, and we've maybe expressed many, many times what's happened to us, even though it's really difficult to talk about. Maybe we're focusing on depression, maybe we're focusing on anxiety, and we feel like we've already told our story, but now and you tell yourself it's not got any better. But I probably haven't told my story to those who are skilled to help me. There are many, many tools available to help a person with post-traumatic stress disorder, I do believe we have to look at the whole person. Trauma in your life will affect not only emotions, and you will have a great difficulty managing anger, rage, hurt generally in your life, or may struggle a great deal just with the topic of forgiveness. You may have a lot of just a thread of fear that goes through every day of your life, and anxiety, prone towards worry. You may feel enormous amount of shame that this has ruined you. Whatever has happened has ruined you forever. And I can tell you some of the hallmarks. Now, there are tools. There is DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. There is tools to deal with emotions, but we also need to look at the whole person. How are we made? Well, there's a spiritual side to our life, and I do believe that individuals who recover long-term tend to address the spiritual or the faith part of their life. And you start to look at, okay, and that may be a really difficult one to look at, but it's a part of the whole person. And we may look at, obviously, the physical issues. Maybe I have a lot of physical complaints. Seen individuals, aches and pains, headaches, but just physical complaints that don't seem to go away. Digestive complaints could be really common. So that part has to be dealt with. How to manage my emotions has to be dealt with. My purpose. What do I do with my life from here? What gives me meaning? Why did I survive this trauma? And we get sometimes stuck on certain questions, and we never get beyond that. So if I go, why did I survive this? And, many others who survived the trauma maybe have died. But we get stuck on certain questions that we may not have an answer to, and they can slow down our healing. So that's, again, we've got to be in the hands of somebody that can really have the skills to help us. And I'm going to also say, as a team, I need a team. Those who understand what's happened in my brain and brain chemistry, those that know how my body is affected by the trauma, those that understand just the emotional, how it distorts my emotions, how I may have a good day and the next day is a very difficult day, but having a team that understands this so that can be treated properly. And that's, of course, what we do at the center. We build teams for individuals so we can cover all these bases. And trauma, well, I have to figure out the topic of forgiveness. I have to address, a lot of times it's self-forgiveness, where I was abusive to myself because of the trauma. I did things that I later regretted because of the trauma. I got in a pattern of super unhealthy, destructive relationships because of the trauma. So here's some hallmarks to know if you're getting better. You will develop a new appreciation for life. This is one of the hallmarks. I start to see, I am so glad I'm alive. I'm not asking why anymore, but I start to develop an appreciation for life. This is what we call post-traumatic growth. I start to then relate to others. I want to relate and be in relationship and have connection and have close relationships versus avoid. That's another hallmark of recovery. I will feel that there's kind of new possibilities for my life. I develop optimism, and I start to look towards the future differently, more optimistic, hopeful, versus despair or despondency. That's all a part of it. All right. There's a lot that's built into post-traumatic stress disorder. There's different terms. There's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. But what we know is, number one, it's very real. And number two, there is healing and recovery. And there's tools. There's even something called EMDR. I'm not going to go into all these, but I'm just saying there are a good set of tools in the right hands that can really help me and help my brain recover, help my emotions recover, help my faith recover. So really, truly, do not lose hope, because hope is created when there's a plan. I have to get the right plan. So today can be the beginning of getting new information. Maybe I need to go online to aplaceofhope.com, take the post-traumatic stress disorder test that we have. It's free. It's a beginning place to see where you score. I may need to get a resource like Triumph Over Trauma. I may need to get in the hands of the right kind of helper, counselor, or maybe I need something that's going to be a little more intense of that, and similar to what we do here at the Center, A Place of Hope. We know the healing power of working with the right team. So today is a day of decision. I may have suffered for 20 years or longer, feel like I'll never get well. I feel like there's no hope for my future. But today we're being called, and it is Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month. I am being called to make a decision. And one of my decisions is I'm going to not give up. I'm going to gather more information, and I am going to place myself in the hands of those that can help me. There truly is hope for trauma and for healing and for recovery, and to put yourself in a position of new strength. I say that because I've seen it now over the last 40 years, obviously thousands of times. I know there's healing.